Good evening, everybody. We will get rolling here now that it is 6:30. Thank you for joining us. You have joined the new board member orientation tonight with the City of Longmont. We thank you for being here, sharing your personal time with us so we can share some information with you. I have three colleagues with me tonight here to present to you. Our presentation will be broken up sort of into four sections. We'll give you a chance to ask some questions after each section. I did want to take just a moment first and introduce my colleagues to you. If the presenters would please come on camera. I see one. There's two. All right. And three. Great. Very good. So with me tonight, wave your hand. We have Eugene May, City Attorney. We also have Rigo Leal, our Public Information Officer, and then Francie Jaffe, our Water Sustainability Conservation Specialist. These fine colleagues of mine will help us give you an orientation about serving as a board member with the City of Longmont. So thank you for being here. First of all, let me do a couple housekeeping things. The meeting is being recorded. Just want you to be aware of that. You should have gotten should have been advised of that when you joined the meeting, I believe. You are muted on purpose. Please raise your hand when we come to question asking session, then we'll allow people to unmute, or may just let everybody unmute. And we will just get going and try and get through this as reasonably in a reasonable amount of time. And let me get started here. Find the right presentation. Can you see my screen? Eugene, yeah? Okay. All right. Eugene shakes his head. Thank you, Eugene. All right, so let me put this on presentation mode. So, board orientation for new advisory board, committee, and commission members. First of all, and most importantly, we want to just welcome you to this important role you have decided to undertake, or to re-undertake for some of you maybe who are being reappointed to serve in your position. And we really want to thank you for choosing public service. It's a very rewarding opportunity, and we hope that you'll find it to be so as well. So with that, again, my colleagues tonight are myself, Don Quintana, the city clerk. I'm going to cover a broad overview of the City of Longmont government, and we'll talk broadly about boards and board members and board meetings. We'll dabble in some parliamentary procedure. Then I'll turn it over to Eugene, the city attorney, who's going to talk about the good legal stuff with you, ethics and open meetings and those conflicts of interest, all that good meaty stuff. Rigo will be next. He'll talk to you about media relations and what to do when, if contacted by the media. And last, we will wrap up with Francie Jaffe. This is a new piece in our board orientation to talk about how to make boards more inclusive and what is your role in that. So that's our plan for tonight. You were each emailed the manual. We're going to follow that manual, but we're not going to walk through it page by page. Feel free to read that at your leisure. There's a lot of information in there. We'd be here for too long if we went through it bit by bit. So don't want to keep you that long. So let's get rolling on your local government, the City of Longmont. Let me pull up. So Longmont, this is your city council. Longmont was formed in 1871. We celebrate our 150th birthday this year. There's going to be quite a few celebrations coming. And we are a home rule municipality. We're not under statutory authority. We're home rule. And our city charter was adopted in August of 1961. We do follow the council manager form of government. Before you on the screen is our current city council. We do have a council election this November, so this will change after November. But from top left to right, as you're looking at the screen, top left is Tim Waters, Councilmember Tim Waters from Ward 1. And then there's Councilmember Joan Peck, she's at large. Councilmember Marcia Martin, she is from Ward 2. And then Mayor Brian Bagley on the right-hand side. On the lower row on the left-hand side, you have Councilmember Polly Christensen at large, Mayor Pro Tem Aaron Rodriguez, and lastly, Councilmember Ward 3, Susie Hidalgo Faring. So that is the current City Council, and I just share that in case you don't have the time to watch a council meeting or haven't engaged with them, just to have their faces familiar to you, so you know who they are. This is how the city is organized in a very broad, and recognize that's a small chart for you all to look at. But our city manager is Harold Dominguez, and I mentioned our government is a council manager form of government. What that means is, and you can see in our small org chart here, that the residents of Longmont elect the city council. The council hires the city manager, and then the city manager runs the city. He is the CEO, if you will, of the city of Longmont. Council also directly hires 2 other employees, the city attorney, so Eugene, who's with us tonight, and then the municipal judge, Judge Frick. Other than that, council doesn't hire employees. They only hire those 3. The rest of the employees are underneath the city manager. And you can see this org chart changes all the time as the needs of the organizations change. So currently, Harold has 2 assistant city managers underneath him, one over external services, one over shared services, which would be like internal services. Then also public safety, which is police, fire, and emergency operations. Community services, which is all the fun stuff, right? Golf and recreation and museum, library. And then also we have a deputy city manager who, if you've been a resident for a long time, you know is Dale Rademacher. Used to just be public works director. Now he oversees all of the utilities, broadband, power and communications, the electric part, and then public works and natural resources. So that in the big picture is the city's structure. In your books, you have org charts, I believe, for each of the big departments. So you can see how the city is organized. We also included for you on page 6, there is everybody's contact information for all of the city leadership. If you ever had a question, leadership staff is very responsive. Happy to help you out if you have any questions. Let me get past these org charts. All right, moving on to the good stuff. Board members and board meetings. So the city has quite a few boards and commissions. We have 22 boards and commissions. Let me resize my screen here for you. Some of those are advisory boards. Some are quasi-judicial. Some are task forces. And I'm blanking on the last one because I'm not looking at my slide. Just a moment. Some are, advisory, quasi-judicial, and task forces. And each of those boards, generally speaking, has some regular members, alternate members, a staff liaison, and a secretary. On some boards, that's just one person, not 2. And most boards have a council liaison. Not all, but most boards have a council liaison. So that the advisory boards are a critical component to the local government. Really, really help council, guide council in all of the many decisions that need to be made about the broad breadth, that's a really good term, about the broad range of services and programs that the city offers. So your service as a board member is extremely critical, and that's why we're glad you're here tonight to help you get a better understanding of the big picture, and hopefully you've already had an orientation with your individual boards. Advisory boards, the bulk of our boards are advisory, and they really are just that, advisory in nature. They are delegated an area for which they're responsible, like the library or the museum, sustainability, those kinds of topics. And they really advise council and make recommendations regarding that service area in particular. We also have quasi-judicial boards, and we have 4, and planning and zoning is sometimes acts as a quasi-judicial board. So we have 5 quasi-judicial boards. Quasi-judicial boards, and I'll let Eugene, you just chime in whenever you like. But quasi-judicial boards are boards which have been delegated the decision-making authority that would be seated with council normally, but it's been delegated to a board to make these decisions. And they can be, or the decisions could be overturned by a court. So the big ones are, or the five boards are Board of Adjustment and Appeals, the Master Board of Appeals. We have two licensing authorities, a marijuana and a liquor licensing authority. And then, as I mentioned, we have the Planning and Zoning Commission. And in your book, you can read more about planning and zoning and how it, if you are on planning and zoning, I know you've already had your orientation and you've learned all the good things you need to know in order to be prepared for those. But you can read more about why, when, and in what circumstances planning and zoning is quasi-judicial. As I mentioned, there's also task forces. Task forces are sort of special focus, short term, not a long standing board, might be to solve a particular issue. One good example that came out of recent was the Climate Action Task Force, which was given a task to accomplish in a shorter period of time. That grew into a bigger project, and Sustainability Advisory Board is now taking over that, and some of those people have been incorporated. But that was one example of a task force that was convened to tackle a topic. So I want to take a moment to talk about the roles of people, the different members of the boards. So regular members and alternate members, not all boards do this the same. I know that Senior Citizen Advisory Board treats regular and alternate members the same. But generally speaking, a regular member is a voting member, and an alternate member is a member who would step in if there aren't enough members for a quorum on the board. They would be treated equally, trained equally, viewed equally, just not voting unless someone were missing. The staff liaison and the staff secretary will talk about their role. And in terms of the council liaison, if you watch council meetings, they've talked recently about trying to better define their role as council liaison. And they haven't made a decision on that as of yet, but generally speaking, their role is to be a connector, really just truly a liaison between the board and the council, and can have an ear to what are the things the board is talking about and needs, and can share that back to council when it's appropriate or relevant, and then can also share back to the board things happening at council, or if council has taken a particular position on something that's relevant to the conversation, those kinds of things. Really just a liaison, a link between council and boards and commissions. So let's take a moment and look at the role of the staff liaison and the secretary. So staff's job is to make your job easy. Really, that's our job. Our job is to put the meeting together, to prepare the agenda and the materials, get it all sent out in a timely fashion. Our job is to post the meeting to make sure that we are legal, we are complying with open meetings law, to have every arrangement set up. If we need a table and 16 chairs, that's staff's job to ensure that the meeting is ready to go. If it means it's a setting up of a Zoom meeting like we've done tonight, that would also be within our purview. Staff secretaries also take minutes for the meeting and bring those back for your approval. Staff also often reaches out to make sure a quorum is available before scheduling the meeting, just to make sure there aren't any problems with that, and really to just support you in everything that you might need so that you can effectively do your job. And lastly, and to not be forgotten, staff's job is to help you facilitate any accommodations that might be requested by the public in order for them to participate. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. What really the reason we're here tonight is to talk about your role as an advisory board member. And so in your book on page 22, there's a guide, I think it's called a guide, Golden Rules to Help You Become an Effective Member. And you're welcome to read through all those rules. I'm not going to go through all of them tonight. I've picked my favorites, and really like to kind of hone the topic of your role as advisory board member tonight towards a couple conversations. In general, the way it's pretty common sense how to be an effective board member. We would recommend that you understand the purpose of the board that you're on, um, that you read foundational documents. If there's bylaws, that you would be familiar with those, or maybe read recent sets of minutes or a master plan if there's a master plan related to the board you serve on. Those kinds of things, being familiar with the work and the charge of that board. Coming prepared to a meeting is very, very helpful for evident reasons. Attending all the meetings that you can. We certainly understand that life happens and you sometimes can't make a meeting. And in those cases, your secretary or liaison has probably shared with you what to do if you aren't able to attend, but just notifying us that you can't make it is certainly sufficient. We get it. Um, and then establishing positive working relationships with other members on the board, as well as with staff. Learning how things work and how staff works can be very helpful, especially if you have questions. And another logistical recommendation we have, and this is a recommendation, is we would recommend that you set up a dedicated email for your service on the board instead of using a personal email where all of your emails go to. And there are a couple reasons for this. We think it'd be easier for you to sort through and find your, just open this. If I open my board email, I'll always have everything I need related to all of my board service. Additionally, we have in recent years had a couple open records requests. Nothing to be worried about or be concerned about, but if it were to happen, and it would be certainly rare, it'd be easier for you and for us to search. We'd ask you to search your email to find conversations relative to whatever it was that was being requested. I know in my personal email, I have like 7,000 emails from Best Buy and I don't know, everybody that wants me to buy something from them. It'd be a nightmare. It'd take me a while to search for it. So we just developed that recommendation, and you can operate however you personally choose. The city does not provide you an email address at this time, and that's because there's a licensing cost around every email that we provide. So at this time, we don't provide emails, so we don't dictate what that looks like. But wanted to give you a recommendation to help you be more successful. Mostly what we find is really, really important about your job as an advisory board member is the table you set when you appear at a board meeting or when you serve on a board. And we view you as ambassadors. You are here with us. You're now part of our team as city employees and public servants, representing the whole city, serving the whole city. And that's a really critical job. So we want to help you be prepared for that because, public service can be a very interesting experience. There's some tips in your handout or in your manual. There are a few handouts about setting the table for civility. And that's really kind of where I'm going to talk now for a couple minutes. I came across revivecivility.org a couple years ago, and these handouts they'd provided. And I just thought it was fabulous and relevant to the work board members and elected officials do. So we've incorporated it into our manual. And some of the recommendations about civil engagement are to bring an open mind when you come to a board meeting, to treat everyone with respect and dignity, to remember that you represent the entire city, and to practice civil engagement. So what is civil engagement? I think we all know the political discourse has gotten challenging, rough, abrasive, all kinds of things. And so civil engagement are sort of rules for engaging where we maybe agree to disagree is maybe a common way we hear that stated. But I want to just dig a little bit into what does that really mean? What are the ways we can really set ourselves up for success in civil engagement as ambassadors for the city of Longmont? And so here you have a few tips. One is have ground rules for respectful and civil discussions. We'll talk about a couple of ways to do that here in a moment. Another is listen to learn, or if any of you have ever done any of the Stephen Covey seminars, he calls it seek first to understand or active listening. Any of those manners, I think we are all probably guilty of forming our response as we listen to people. This listen to learn is a reminder to us to actually listen to listen to what a person has to say. Um, Practice civility with someone you trust. And by that we mean, or they mean, like you would practice for an interview, practice some of those questions. Maybe set a couple scenarios for yourself and engage with a trusted friend, spouse, coworker, whatever might be most appropriate for you, and practice maybe a difficult conversation. Maybe you know that somebody is going, maybe practice the scenario somebody makes an inappropriate comment at your board meeting. How are you going to respond? Just practicing that will make you a better responder in the moment. Also, plan ahead and think about how you want to be heard. Reminding yourself that there are different ways to make the points you want to make as you make your viewpoints heard as a board member on the board you're serving on. And just thinking about being thoughtful about that can also set the table for civility. And lastly, as I mentioned, is accept differences. We all know that there's a variety of opinions and a variety of ideas about how to make Longmont the best place. And the reason you are all on the boards is to sort of bring all those opinions together, vet them out, and make the best recommendation possible for Longmont to City Council. And so sometimes we do disagree, and we just have to work through that on the board. And so that's why I really liked revivecivility.org, and feel free to look through the handouts that are in your manual. They go into a little more detail than I have gone here. Also important is understanding what the public expects of you. And many of you may be familiar. Maybe you've come to speak to council before, or come to speak to the board you're on, or another board. Doesn't even have to be a city of Longmont. And I think we all have sort of similar expectations about what that experience should be like. And as board members and as city staff, our job is to help create that, help fulfill that expectation. So you can see we believe that the public expects to be treated with politeness and respect. We believe that they have the expectation to have a chance to share their opinions, that they will be heard. They expect to be heard in a active listening kind of manner, and not to be personally attacked or criticized. And I know that none of us want to do that, want to attack anybody, but we have seen some kind of tough engagements, mostly directed, at council members or those kinds of things. And just being prepared for that. Again, if you have a plan, that can be very helpful. If you think that through, this is maybe a new role for you as a public servant and a representative of the city of Longmont. And just knowing that something you disagree with might come your way can be very, very helpful. And Francie at the end is going to give us some tools for a quick trick for how to handle some difficult conversations at the end. So I'm excited to see that. It's a new addition. The chair also has an important role, and this is not a training necessarily for chairpersons, but the chair's role is a critical one on a board in terms of the rules of engagement. And the chair has some extra responsibilities. So whoever you elect as chair, and if any of you are chair people, you're lucky. You have a little bit more of a job. The chair needs to manage the meeting and keep it orderly, keep things moving along, ensure that the agenda gets, all the items on the agenda are discussed and addressed or managed as much as possible. Sometimes that isn't possible. The chair should also ensure that mutual respect is the foundation for all discussion and engagement, and manage verbal exchanges. When there are verbal exchanges, the chair should manage those. The chair should also adhere to meeting procedures, starting on time, ending on time. Whatever the rules of decorum are for your board, the chair should help manage those. And the chair should also ensure that anybody needing special accommodations gets those accommodations. So staff would be the one to help provide the accommodation. So if somebody needed a sign language interpreter, the chair it'd be important that the chair recognize that interpretation is needed and then lean on staff to help provide that accommodation. We do ask, generally, we ask people who needing accommodation to contact us 24 hours prior to the meeting. That isn't always possible. It doesn't always happen. Things don't always get communicated appropriately. So if you see it and you see the need for it, please reach out to your liaison or secretary, your staff person in attendance, so that we can provide whatever accommodation might be necessary. Those are the chair's roles in very brief. One of the ways the chair can help manage difficult conversations is parliamentary procedure. And in your manual, we've provided 4 or 5 pages, page 28 to 31 or 32, goes into some detail about parliamentary procedure. I'm not going to belabor that with you tonight. Parliamentary procedure is a way to help manage a difficult conversation, and it's very effective. Also, I believe that most of your boards are just probably not that formal. Even city council doesn't operate that formally. They do not follow parliamentary procedure to a T. If you watch at all, sometimes the mayor will hone in on some refined parliamentary procedure if a conversation is particularly difficult to help manage the conversation and move it forward. But they often do, the manual talks about like a friendly amendment, that friendly amendments don't truly exist. Council uses those all the time. So my main point to you about parliamentary procedure is it's the norms for each board are different, and I'd encourage you to follow the norm for your board. If it feels like more formality is needed in order to move the conversation forward, parliamentary procedure is a good tool to have in your pocketbook. Some basics here, very basics. Members should address the chair, not address each other back and forth when you're in your meeting. Members should wait until they're recognized by the chair to speak. Wait until you have the floor, as they say. Generally, a motion is made, and once it's seconded, then it's open for discussion. If a motion isn't seconded, then it's not something the board apparently would like to discuss, and it dies, and that conversation ends. If you're following strict parliamentary procedure, each person on the board would have, no more than 2 chances to speak on each topic, and it would be up to the chair to manage that. That's a pretty strict rule. It takes a lot of management by the chair, so not required. Again, just so you have familiarity with parliamentary procedure. Chairs, it's helpful, very helpful, that chairs take care of the motions and the votes, that the chair restate the motion so everybody's clear what's being voted on. So chairs have to listen really carefully and often take notes. You'll often see the mayor taking notes. Chairs should verbalize results of votes so that the public and everybody around is aware if a motion, if it passed or if it failed, and then who voted against it if somebody voted against it. And then lastly, the chair should ensure that motion protocol is followed, meaning there shouldn't be more than one motion on a table at a time, with a couple of exceptions. That's up to the chair to sort of manage that ebb and flow of conversation. And let's see, most motions require a second. They should either be acted on, meaning voted upon, or withdrawn. So a motion that just sits there, that's just not proper. Got to do something with a motion. Most of them are passed by a majority vote, and a tied vote is a failed vote. So if there's a tie, if for some reason a board normally has 7 members but only 6 were able to be there one night, and something was voted on 3-3, that would fail. That item would fail, because a tie in parliamentary procedure is a fail. And really, most importantly, we'd look to your board that you sit on for the level of formality that is common, that is used. Most commonly, I think, in my experience on a board, um, the topic is on the agenda, the chair introduces the topic, there's some discussion, and then after some discussion, it kind of whittles down. It's pretty clear there's a decision that the board is ready to make a decision, and then a motion is made and seconded, a chance for a little more debate, uh, and then a vote, and then that topic is over. That's the more common flow of how motions and votes go on a board. But you would lean to your board's norms and rules for that. So, like I said, in your manual, there's more information on parliamentary procedure. We have actual manuals of parliamentary procedure in our office. If for some reason you needed a copy, we have copies. We also have these great little pamphlets. I kind of call it Parliamentary Procedure for Dummies, but that's not its title. But it's a very simple little pamphlet that breaks it down into very understandable bites. Um, and I'd be happy to send one to you if anybody wanted one of those as well. So, in terms of the big picture, really, what we hope you gain from tonight's presentation is the importance of your role as an advisory board member and your importance in helping set the stage for civil engagement so that residents can engage with boards in the city and make Longmont the best possible place we can be. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to pause because I've done a lot of talking and give you a chance to ask any questions. Are there any questions? And if you're on camera, you can wave like that, or you could raise your hand in the app. And if there's not, that's fine too. We can move straight on to Eugene. Give you a couple seconds. Look, there's Eugene already. He's ready to roll. Great. You can always email as well. All right, Eugene, all yours.
Thank you very much, Dawn. And so excited to see so many people here. I guess that's what happens when you go into a show in a global pandemic for like a year. I think we got like 30 people. So that's awesome. This is usually one of my favorite nights to meet people, hear where they're coming from, why you're interested in a board, and that's so difficult to do in a Zoom setting. So thank you for sticking with us. Usually Don and I have been doing this presentation for many years. It's usually a little more interactive. I usually do more color commentary, but it's just kind of hard in Zoom. So thank you very much for bearing with us and spending your Monday night with us. Before I get into my slides, I'm going to talk about a couple of laws that go to transparency in government. And I just wanted to say a few words that you are now an ambassador for the city. You are a government official. And the city has invested a lot of time and resources into its transparency laws in order to gain the trust of our community. And so we expect compliance by all our boards with our transparency laws of open meetings, open records, and certainly ethics. So as you move into your roles on your boards, just try to remember that you are representing the city, and the city is very committed to public engagement and transparency in government. And those are sort of the overlying themes of the laws that I'm going to be talking about. So Dawn, I might have missed this beginning. It's wait for questions till the end, or are people able to ask during the presentation if you have questions?
I think it's easier just to see everybody when the presentation is not up. So that's why I thought it's easier at the end.
Okay, works for me. So if you could pull up a slide deck.
You are ready to go.
All right. Next slide, please. So we're covering 4 sort of topics, open meetings, open records really apply to all government, all about the transparency of our business that we conduct here at the city. A couple quick words on Amendment 41. There is a gift ban associated with that voter initiated ethics and government constitutional amendment. And then a couple words about conflicts of interests and quasi-judicial proceedings. Dawn mentioned that we do have 5 boards here, and there are some special rules that apply there because those boards are determining people's rights as the name implies, sort of a judge-like manner. Next slide. So open meetings is a good place to start. And lawyers think about what is the intent, what is the purpose of this law? And for open meetings, it's that the formation of public policy is a public business, and it needs to be conducted in public, not behind closed doors, and the public needs to be given an opportunity to at least observe the proceedings. The definition under the open meetings law is very broad. You know, back in the old days, before the pandemic, it was mostly in-person meetings. And now that we've gone much more online, you know, it does apply to Zoom meetings like this one. And we have seen the rise of email. And I think for boards and commissions, this is an area where I see boards maybe stub their toes sometimes, conducting meetings by email discussing public business. Next slide, please. So the scope of the open meeting law sounds very broad. It's really about the discussion of public policy. The Colorado Supreme Court has limited this a little bit. It has to be within the policy-making powers of the governmental entity. With the boards and commissions here at the city, most of them are in an advisory role in the policy process to city council, and that would certainly create that link to the policy-making powers of the governmental body. There are a couple of exceptions that are good to know about. Chance meetings and social gatherings are not open meetings. So if you're in holiday parties, board members mix that in the same social circles, you know, those types of meetings are not open meetings for purposes of the open meetings law. But of course, it depends upon what you talk about. If you bump into somebody or a couple of board members and you start talking about things on the upcoming agenda, you know, those are the sorts of things that should be happening at an open meeting. You know, talk about the ball game, talk about your kids, don't talk about what's on the agenda. There's a place and time for that that's set by your staff liaison. Next slide, please. So numbers are important. I think about 7-member boards, and because city council is a 7-member board, planning and zoning, a lot of our boards have that number. Under the open meetings law, if there's 3 or board members getting together, talking about the policy making business of the city, then that's an open meeting. Then that needs to be open to the public, and it needs to be noticed so the public knows what's going to be happening and have the opportunity to participate in that meeting. Also under the open meetings law, a record needs to be kept of that meeting. Staff liaisons or secretaries to the board generally take care of the minutes for the board. And although it may vary amongst the boards, at city council approves the minutes, goes into the official records of the city, so people know what happened at that meeting. Next slide. And at least for me, one of the interesting parts about the open meetings law is our executive sessions. Those are statutorily authorized closed doors meetings for specific purposes. There are 7 of those. The most common ones are real property transactions. Obviously, you wouldn't want the other party to know that you're interested in their property or how much you're willing to pay for those things. Personnel matters, and my favorite, of course, is legal advice. Conversations with your attorney for specific legal questions is confidential, and those are properly closed door sessions with city council. I think it rarely comes up. I think I've been here 12 years, and twice I've had executive sessions, one at the Historic Preservation Commission on some real estate issues, and one at Planning and Zoning. So not a very common occurrence, but if you think you need a executive session, contact your staff liaison or my office, and we can make sure that you go through the proper procedures to identify that executive session and convene it properly. Next topic. Next topic is Colorado Open Records Act. Again, another law with a goal for transparency and openness of governance. And the basic concept here is the city's records are the public records. And the public has a right to be able to see what we're doing with their taxpayer dollars. Next slide, please. The Open Records Act clearly applies to the city of Longmont, clearly applies to boards and commissions, so you should act with that as the default. Furthermore, the starting place is all public records of our government are open to inspection. There are certain exceptions to that rule. But for most matters that boards and commissions deal with, these are going to be subject to disclosure upon request. For example, exceptions are similar to those for executive sessions, like personnel matters. General public can't come in and ask for an employee's file. Legal advice is another pretty broad category. And then there are certain business and financial information that could be identified as confidential by, development applicants, economic incentive agreements, things like that. Next slide. So lawyers love definitions. That's the first place we go to in statutes. The Open Records Act has a definition for a record, and it is tremendously broad. All writings made, maintained, or kept by the city of Longmont. So the default is, if you do it in your capacity as a board or commission member, it's going to be made or kept or maintained by the city, and it's going to be open record. Next, please. In this online digital age, electronic examples are the most challenging ones. Don mentioned, with email, we get a lot of open records requests for city employee emails, but you got to think about texts and the traditional paper files. I think most of us are slowly trending away from those, but all of those records are going to be subject to disclosure upon request. Next slide. So 2 words of advice on open records. My first is a front page times call test, and it's very simple. Do you want what you're about to send via email to end up on the front page times call? And if not, don't hit send. Think about it. Think that you're representing the city, and is that something that you would be proud of to end up in public? And second, if you receive an open records request, the city has a very efficient process set up through the city clerk's office to deal with these types of requests. Under the statute, we have 3 business days to provide a response to the requester. We don't look at the purpose of the request. We just look if we have responsive documents or not. And if they are asking for emails from a board and commission, if they are in a separate email account, it makes it much easier for city staff to get in there, figure out what's responsive, and not have to sort through all your personal email, appointments, dog appointments, things like that. So that would be helpful. Next slide, please. So you may or may not know that there is a constitutional amendment voted by the people in 2006 regarding ethics in government. There are a couple other rules about lobbying, which don't really apply here. I think the one thing that I do want to point out is that there is a gift ban. Started out at $50. It's been CPI adjusted up to $65. It's out there. If you thought that you were going to get rich with a whole bunch of gifts by volunteering to be on a board and commission, I hate to disappoint you. It's probably not going to happen. But these are most important, I think, in the quasi-judicial arena, where there may be a perception of bias if you are receiving gifts from applicants, would be the most likely scenario. Next slide. So the $65, it could be in kind, it could be cash, it could be tickets to the Nuggets game, if only we were so lucky. But if you are made that offer and there is some connection between that person and what's coming before the board, you should consult us or just decline. There are a few exceptions. Unsolicited tokens of appreciation. These are, plaques, or when the mayor goes to our sister city in Japan or Mexico and they do, I think he received a kimono, something like that. That's a gift to the city of appreciation. That does not fall under the gift ban, fortunately. Next slide. Conflicts of interest. So the actual legal framework for conflicts of interest is difficult to meet. I mean, unless it's a brick of cash in your freezer, there's probably not going to be a statutory violation. But you look at personal financial ties to whatever might be before you. If it's a spouse or a family member that's presenting before a board, there's clearly a conflict there. When I talk about conflict, I mean whether you can remain an impartial decision maker on whatever matter is before you. And I talk about special impact to your interest due to location or proximity. I remember, you may remember Mayor Coombs, who had an interest in the red zone. And we would have these conversations all the time. If he's looking at something that would affect the downtown, I ask him, is there any special impact to your business that's not the same as all other businesses down there? Because part of the value of our citizen boards or our citizens being elected officials is they each bring their own experience to the conversation, and you don't want to disqualify somebody just because they have those experiences, unless there's a special impact or benefit to their particular interests. At the city, we are very protective of our confidence by the community in government operations. So if there's an appearance of a bias, we're concerned with that too. And those situations, I think I would advise us talk to your staff liaison to just kind of talk through it. We've seen a number of different potential conflicts or appearances of conflicts. And then the last word of advice is, what would your mom think? If you're not proud to tell your mom that that's what you're doing, then, you probably shouldn't be doing it as a government official representing the city of Longmont. Next slide. Don mentioned at the top of the presentation about quasi-judicial proceedings. There are a couple specific requirements and process protections that go with quasi-judicial boards. like I said, usually there are some sort of property right at interest in the hearing. And so it's important that we have a fair hearing to protect all of the interests, property owner, as well as the neighboring surrounding community members. Next slide. Whoa. In legal terms, we call it due process, to make sure that everybody's getting a fair hearing and that the appropriate criteria are being applied. I think there's sort of two sides of that coin. One, as your role in a board or commission member, you will be applying the criteria to the evidence presented at the hearing, so that the applicant can is able to understand what's being presented at the hearing, as well as the opponents or any other interested stakeholder is going to be able to have that input and have that go into the decision-making process. The flip side of that is you shouldn't be having communications or receiving information about that application, that hearing matter outside the hearing, because that would be unfair, because the applicant isn't there to hear what's being said, or other interested stakeholders like the neighbors aren't able to hear what's being said there either. So the ex parte communication rule is to make sure everything is being presented at that hearing in fairness to all parties involved. Next slide. So if you find yourself in this situation, I often advise my city council members and planning and zoning commission, direct those interested members, the public, to the hearing, or submit comments for the hearing. You can contact the staff person and get those into the record to make sure that everything is being considered at that hearing. And this goes for the remedies section for conflicts of interest and or ex parte communication. You don't have to be in a quasi-judicial setting to have these apply. You know, if you think you have a conflict but can remain an impartial decision maker, to me, disclosure is the best approach and way to remedy this. You know, at the hearing, at your board meeting, disclose on the record, you know, what sort of contact you have with the person or what other interest would be creating that conflict. And it's up to you to make that determination whether you can remain impartial decision maker or giving advice to city council. If it's too much, if the relationship is too much of a conflict or you can't remain impartial, then in order to protect the integrity of the proceedings, you should be recusing yourself from that agenda item. And that's where an alternate can come in for that matter. And then you can take your seat after that. Next slide. I think that's the end. Yes, it is. And so I'd be happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
I'm not seeing any, Eugene, but we'll give people a second to process.
All right.
I think we're in good shape.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you all. We are getting there, almost done here. Next on the agenda is Rigo Leal, the Public Information Officer, to talk to you about media relations and how to handle the media.
Thank you, Don. I'm happy to be here, and like Don and Eugene, I want to welcome you to the city. Again, my name is Rigo Leal. I'm the city's Public Information Officer, and in listening to Don and Eugene speak, two big themes really hit me, and I hope to hit those same themes with you through my short presentation. And that is, you know, you are all representatives of the city, and the other one is transparency. And those are two big things that we should all keep in mind, especially with media relations. So just because you're a volunteer doesn't mean you don't have responsibilities. And I think Don and Eugene have made that very clear. So before I go on, let me just describe my PIO job duties. I have several responsibilities in the city, but my main job is managing the city's media relations program. And part of our program is proactive. That's when we put together news releases, when we post to social media, etc. And we're trying to get important news out to people in the city about what's going on in Longmont. The other half of that program is the reactive piece. That's when we react or provide information to reporters when they ask for it. And so that's what I'm going to concentrate on more tonight for all of you. Typically, when a reporter needs information, they call me. And it's my job to answer those questions or to find the person within the city to answer those questions. And so that's a service that I provide to all staff members in the city, city council members as well. And that's a service that I provide for you as well as boards and commissions members. So if you keep that in mind. As it stands now, if a reporter wants boards and commissions information, they call me or a staff liaison, and typically the liaison responds. But sometimes a reporter will want to go around me or go around the liaison and contact the board member directly. And so if that happens, you don't need to panic. You don't need to worry. First of all, it's rare. But secondly, I'm here again as your resource. If you ever have any questions about talking to a reporter, by all means, call me and we'll hash it out. We usually hash it out with the liaison, with me, with you, and figure out how to respond to any question or questions that you get from a reporter. So let me be clear. Let me say it again. It is not your responsibility to talk to any reporter. Boards and commissions members are not obligated to speak to the media. However, it is my job to make sure the city responds to all reporter questions. So please keep me in the loop if and when you get those types of requests, because we don't deflect, we don't deny, we don't bury our heads in the sand. We respond to every media request. And again, that doesn't have to be you. That's my job. I need to figure that out. So please lean on me if and when you need to. So let me stop for just a second, because I know you guys are already drinking from a fire hose. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time giving you media relations training. That can take hours. Sometimes it takes days. Sometimes it takes a lot of practice, a lot of role playing to figure out media relations. So that's not what I'm going to do. My intent is to give you some tips and tricks for handling a media call that you might get. So I provided a short outline in your orientation packet, and you'll find that on page 69. It's titled Guidelines on How to Talk to the News Media. There you'll see a dozen or so bullet points with advice from me. And like Don and Eugene, I'm not going to go through each bullet point. I just want to make you aware that it's there and you can take a look at it. And if you have any questions about it, by all means, give me a call. We'll talk about it. So instead of talking about each and every one of those bullet points, I just want to leave you with a couple of thoughts, some tips and tricks. Again, as I mentioned earlier, chances are pretty slim that a reporter is going to call you or email you directly. Again, those requests usually come to me. If you are contacted by a reporter, ask them to email their questions to you and to me. That's usually the easiest way to kind of get your thoughts together. If a reporter calls you cold and you pick up the phone and they say, "Hey, I'm Joe from Times Call, and I want to ask you some questions," I think at that point you just need to take a breath, take a step back, and just say, "Hey, why don't you email me those questions?" That way I can look at them, think about them, respond appropriately. And so I think that helps you, not so you're not put on the spot. And it helps us in terms of thinking and responding appropriately to whatever those questions might be. So that's sort of the first trick or tip there. Just, ask for email questions. That helps. That usually works to your advantage. If you are comfortable answering media questions, by all means, you can. I'm not advising you not to talk to the media. I know it sounds that way because I sort of focused on that. But if you're comfortable and you know what you're talking about and you feel that you know what you want to say and how to say it, by all means, that is certainly your right to do that. I'm not going to try to mute you in that regard. But again, just keep in mind, as Dawn has mentioned, and as Eugene mentioned as well, you're representing the city. So what you say is likely to reflect on your board or commission and on the city as well. So if you're going to offer an opinion to the media, make sure you're telling them, hey, this is my opinion. This does not reflect the board. This is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm saying. This is about me and my opinion. So if you make that clear, you should be okay for the most part. But again, you're representing the city, and that's an important responsibility, I think. Let's see. If you prefer not to respond, of course, like I said, call me. We'll sit down. We'll talk about it. It could be a 5-minute conversation. It could be an hour strategy session. It just kind of depends on the questions and your comfort level. And again, just because the initial call came to you doesn't mean you become the person who has to respond. It could be me. It could be your liaison. It could be someone on city staff who's an expert, an information expert. Those are the people that are more likely to respond to questions, especially if they're technical kinds of things. And you as a commission member just don't know what those answers might be. There's no point in putting you on the spot in that regard. So again, as Dawn mentioned, we're here to help you. Please lean on us as staff members and lean on me for things happening with the media. So again, this strategy is not intended to deflect or avoid tough questions. Instead, it's designed to provide help and to provide the correct information to the reporter and to the public. Dawn mentioned the golden rules on page 22 of the manual, and there's one in there that I think that is particularly relevant to what I'm talking about, and this is rule number 5 on page 22, and it says, remember to represent the whole city. As a board, commission, or committee member, you have been appointed to represent the public interest and not a special group or interest. The question, what is best for the entire city of Longmont community, should take precedence over what is best for my special interest group. So again, if you want to share that personal opinion, make sure he understands or she understands that you're speaking for yourself. So that wraps it up. I don't want to drag this down or get too complicated with that particular message. Let me reiterate what Eugene said earlier about the front page test. When he said that, he was talking about email in particular. I'd like to apply that to speaking to a reporter as well. If you don't want to see it on the front page of the Times Call, don't say it. It's that simple. And I think that's it. And so I want to apologize for not having slides and forcing you to look at me the whole time. No one should have to go through that. But anyway, that's it for me. And so if anyone has any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
And I would just add, Rigo is wonderful. If you are ever approached by somebody from the media, it can be very, what's the word?
Unsettling.
Scary, unsettling. Yes, I have leaned on Rigo in certain situations, and in others, answered myself and just CC'd Rigo. So depends on the scenario. Rigo's an awesome resource. So just jot his name down just in case, and always loop in your staff liaison and secretary as well. Any questions? I'm not seeing any hands raised up or anybody. Looks like not.
Okay.
Thank you, Rigo. Thanks
You're
for
welcome,
being here.
Don.
All
You're
right.
welcome.
All right. Our final presenter for the evening is Francie Jaffe. Francie is a newer member of the city team and is currently the water conservation sustainability specialist. Did I get that all right off the top of my head? Yay. She also is a member of an important new team the city has formed, the Equity Committee. And she'd like to share with you some thoughts and ideas around inclusive boards. And so, with that, I'll turn it over to Francie.
Great, thank you, Dawn. Good evening, everyone. As Dawn pulls up my slides, as Dawn mentioned, my name's Francie Jaffe. I'm the Water Conservation and Sustainability Specialist for the city. So it is a long title, so good job, Dawn. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And as Dawn mentioned, I'm also a member of the city's internal equity team. This is a newer team that the city is working to try to embed equity in our city programs. I provided a little bit more information in your packet. So I'll be focusing and talking a little bit more. I think Dawn kind of gave an introduction to this and when she started, and I'll kind of continue that conversation on how we can make steps towards inclusive boards. Next slide. So this is our 2019 Longmont community profile. It's just highlighting a couple of different demographics of our city, from age to race and ethnicity. And I wanted to pull it up to highlight that we do have a diverse city. And it's important to embrace, respect, celebrate, learn from, and empower from all of our members. As both Dawn and Eugene mentioned, as a city board member, you are representing the city, you have a direct voice to city council. And if we're not kind of embracing our diverse community, we're going to miss out from great solutions that we can learn from everyone in our community. So one way of doing it, when I did my introduction, I said my pronouns, so she, her, hers. So by doing that, one, now you know how to refer to me, but it also is a signal to our LGBTQ plus community that we're in a safe space where someone can share their preferred pronoun. And by doing that, we create an inclusive space so that we can really learn from those communities. Because if they don't feel safe to show up to a board, we're going to really miss out from their expertise. Next slide. So I'm just going to run through like 2 different examples of situations and how you might respond to that situation. So one situation is a monolingual Spanish speaker. This could happen with any monolingual speaker, but that's not a monolingual English speaker. But I wanted to highlight Spanish because Spanish is our largest non-English language. So this is probably the language this might most likely happen, but it could happen with other languages in our community. So what do you do? So it's really important that you acknowledge the resident, make them feel welcome, and still give them an opportunity to speak. And one way to make sure you have a really good plan to make them feel welcome and have that opportunity to speak and feel like they're being heard is to make a plan with your board of how you might respond. So Dawn mentioned we have board liaisons, board staff liaisons who can help with these efforts. But we also have resources that I think it's important you're aware of. The city has a resource called Language Line. Essentially, you can call in, get access to a number of different languages, including sign language. So this is a resource so that when someone comes, maybe you have like a one-pager that you can give them that says, kind of introduces the board, welcomes them, and lets them know you'll try to find an interpreter. So that way there is a way for them to listen to the meeting, you can react, and then also if they want to speak at the meeting, you can there's an opportunity for everyone to kind of learn from that member. I also want to highlight, if you have a bilingual speaker on your board, it is not that person's responsibility to do translation and interpretation. If that person is doing translation and interpretation entire meeting, then they can't act as a board member. So we want to make sure that they could do their job and aren't kind of told to just kind of, for that meeting, be the interpreter. Next slide. So as Dawn mentioned, sometimes comments come up and people say something where they maybe don't intend to be harmful, but maybe say something that is an offensive comment. So there's this process called the VCR approach, or validate, challenge, and request. So validate, sometimes we mishear people, so it's important to say, I just want to confirm that I heard you correctly. Maybe don't repeat the offensive comment. You don't want to then again trigger someone. Then challenge, essentially, and a good way of challenging someone could be just ask them, do you think this could be offensive to some members of our community? Or do you think there are people present who have these identities that you could be offensive? And then just make a simple request. Going forward, if maybe it was a metaphor, can you use a different metaphor just to describe a different word? And I think it's really important also to help keep board meetings on track is I would be happy to talk to you, or I'd be happy to connect you to the city's equity team. We can work as a resource after the meeting if you have further questions. As a board member, you have a gender, you're trying to get through things. It's very important to acknowledge when these things come up, but you also don't want it to completely derail the next hour of your meeting. So creating an option to continue to have that conversation outside the meeting could be beneficial. Also, sometimes we put our foot in our mouth and we intend something, and the impact that has is not where it's coming from. Like if I accidentally stepped on your foot and I didn't mean to, it doesn't mean it didn't still hurt really bad that I stepped on your foot. So if someone is actually kind of talking to you about something you said, we all kind of get this very defensive reaction. So it's really good to take a breath. Remember that it's not about you. They're just trying to, you just kind of want to respond in a way that's calm and collected, and again offer to discuss outside of the meeting. And to further that, we're all learning, we are all making mistakes, so we want to kind of understand why this happened and kind of make steps going forward. Next. So this is in your board packet. This is from I think it's called I might pronounce this wrong, Deloitte Insights. It's different ways for inclusive leadership for board members, different ways from commitment to collaboration that you can take steps with your board to create a inclusive board space. Besides the resources that Dawn also mentioned earlier, the city is part of two different organizations, the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. They have a lot of great tools on their website. We're also part of the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. They have an equity foundations training that's directly kind of connected to government. So it's usually for government employees, but there could be some helpful resources. And then just some quick tips, like I introduce myself with my pronouns. You can also see my title. I have my pronouns. So if you're looking at my name, you can see what my preferred pronouns. Ask how someone's name is pronounced. If you're not sure, they'll probably appreciate you asking instead of not saying their last name or just ignoring it. And then again, make a plan because we do have monolingual speakers. So with that, I'm just gonna stop with questions. And here's my contact information. If you send me a question, I can also send it out to the full internal equity team. We don't exactly have a public-facing equity team email at this time, but I can either answer the question or work with our internal team to help answer that question for you.
Thank you, Francie. I stopped sharing just to be able to see the whole screen and give everybody a chance to ask any questions. Y'all are a quiet group tonight. Hey, we got a question. Let me. Jennifer Miller, you have a question. Go ahead. You should be able to unmute.
Hi, friends. Thank you, John. It's all very clear. I'm so impressed. It's very clear, and I just want to thank Francie and the whole equity team. This is so impressive. It is fabulous, wonderful, so fun to live in Longmont. Thank you.
Thank you for those nice comments. I'm glad that worked. Now you see it can work. Would you anybody else like to ask any other questions? You could ask Francie or any of the other presenters. All right. Oh, Jerry. You should be able to unmute, Jerry. Go ahead. Yep, there you go. There you are.
There I am. Hi. So I think changing my email is a really good idea. And are you, Dawn, the person to contact with a new email, and that will go to all the appropriate people? Or do I need to do something more than that?
That's a great question. If you do set up a dedicated email, reach out to your secretary and staff liaison, and then they will feed that into the clerk's office.
Okay.
But if you get it to us, we can also get it. We will make sure it gets to all the right places. Either way is fine.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Sounds like a good idea.
Good. Thank you. Holly. You should be able to unmute.
Got it. Got it.
There you go.
So this is just a quick question for Francie. I'm wondering if, from a city perspective, if there's any tools that you might have to allow us to recruit more diverse people to our board.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think probably I think it's really important to have a conversation as a board before you try to recruit diverse members of how can we create an inclusive space? Because it's not just about recruiting people, it's making a space where they can feel comfortable and stay. So I think that's a very important thing to kind of have a conversation as a board. How do you make it more beneficial for people to stay, but then also make sure you're very clear about why do you want more diverse members? No one wants to be just at the table because of the color of their skin or their sexual orientation or their gender. So making sure the board has those conversations first is really important. And then in terms of specific board for recruitment, the Deloitte Insights seem to have a lot of good, I would look them up. They seem to have a lot of good recommendations of where I got that diagram from. But I would also look at GARE to see if they have specific resources. My specialty isn't specifically boards and equity, so I just recommend a Google search of like boards and increasing diverse recruitment. There's a lot of articles out there, but I can also see if we can find a couple different ones, and then I'll send it to Dawn to send out to the group.
Thank you, Francie. And I was just going to add, our office actually does recruitment for boards and commissions. As you know, you all worked with Michelle to set up your interview and all of those things. And it is an ongoing topic ever since I've been hired by the city, how to increase diversity. Council is the ultimate appointing body for boards and commissions. So expressing your desire to council is also another way or another important piece of that puzzle. But I think Francie makes a really valid point because we just don't see tons of diverse applications. And there's a myriad of reasons for that. But part of it, I think, is probably the safe space. And so starting there and the equity team's work is a really great way for us to start as an organization of creating the right space, and then, build it and they shall come. Hopefully is a good model, and it's something we've all got to work on. It's a great question. Thank you for that. Any others? Yeah, Wes, go ahead.
Yes, my question is for you, Dawn, or maybe Eugene, going to Jerry's point on a separate email. If there is a request for open records, is it something that I would provide all the email that I would receive for board activity, or somebody needs to look through all my email? Because I've set up a folder in my Outlook for all the email to keep it in one space. But it's, if I have a separate one, it's about trying to keep track of, have I checked that lately? And I think that I just wouldn't want to mix my business stuff with an open request.
Right. That makes tons of sense. And that also a great question. I'd say our first ask would be our records manager, which is our deputy city clerk, Lucienne Petroco, handles all of our Cora requests. And she would reach out to you, first of all, to see, do you have records? Do you think you have records that meet this request? And if so, how many? If it were a lot, something that's going to take more than an hour's time for you and us to gather and go through, then we would put together an estimate of time and ask them for a deposit to help cover the cost of assembling those records. Usually we request that ask you to provide us the records if it's from your email. However, we've also had scenario where the person's email that was being requested just preferred that we looked and handed us, their iPad or whatever, and email logged in and said, here you go, please feel free to search for whatever you need and pull down the record. So I don't know, Eugene, if you want to add to that. We've done both.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I would just want to reemphasize personal is personal. And so the documents have to be responsive to the open records request, and it has to relate to official city business. It's just sorting the personal from the business is usually the challenge if we have a mixed email box. And so it just depends upon what we're presented with. If you've got a separate email account and it's all city business, then staff can assist you with that. If it's sorting your personal from your board and commission member business, you might be in a better position to do that. And so then we're not going through all your email. And so it really just depends. But personal is always personal, and we're not going to be disclosing that. The other thing I would say in this day and age of the proliferation of email, we do those searches for responsive documents by searching for keywords. That's all you can really do these days. And we keep records of what we searched for, and we did our good faith effort to discover and provide those responsive documents. But beyond that, it's just resource prohibitive to go through and look at every single email out of thousands, especially if they're going to be mixed with personal.
Great questions. Very good. Well, we are so appreciative that you have taken time to be with us tonight. Feel free to email any of us. Oh, it looks like Tom, would you like to ask a question? You are free to unmute. Go ahead and unmute. You can click on the unmute, or you can sometimes hold the space bar and speak, but you got to hold it.
Am I unmuted now?
You are. Yes, go ahead.
Hey, I have a question, perhaps for Eugene. It might be directed. As a member of the Museum Advisory Board, or any board, I guess, would I be liable if there was some type of litigation brought towards the museum? Say someone fell and on some ice or whatever and got injured, as a board member, would I be liable, or is there coverage for board members through the city of Longmont?
A couple different responses. They would be, plaintiffs would generally be suing the city. We're the ones with money, right?
Correct.
I would say you would not be liable unless you were personally involved in the situation, in which case you would be acting within your official capacity and fall under the city umbrella in terms of insurance and governmental immunity. Okay,
I just wondered, having some experience with boards over my career, those were always questions that they asked me at the time, and we had they would be covered under our umbrella in our hospital. But I was just curious how it worked with the city of Longmont and the museum.
Yeah, I think unless there was some malintent where you would be personally liable rather than in your personal capacity rather than your official capacity, as long as you were just acting within your board role, that would be under the city.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Great questions. Thank you all so much. As I was noting, our emails are our first name dot last name at longmontcolorado.gov. That's the template for city employee emails. So feel free to email myself or Eugene or Francie or Rigo with any questions. And we are just really thankful that you're here tonight, and you're free to go about your Monday evening. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you for attending.
Thank you for hosting us.
Thank you for having us.